Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now, this is a show where I look at your images and try to give you some tips and tricks on how you could keep moving forward by improving your technique, composition, and photo editing. Anyway, I've been doing this show for maybe almost 3 years now. And I'm going to start first by explaining what exactly we're going to do. First, I always take your images and I look at the technical part of the photos. This is where I look at things like camera settings, sharpness, exposure, noise, and that fun stuff. After that, I also look at the composition or the artistic part of the image, and that's where I'm more interested in things like composition, storytelling, the main subject, clear visual story, and everything to do with that artistic part of the image. And of course, to finish the triangle where we have the composition, technique, we need to add the photo editing. So if I think that it's beneficial, I always try to gives you tips and tricks on how you could edit the image or how you could adjust it a little bit. So for the, let's have a look. For the part where I edit your image, we're using Luminar Neo, and it's a great photo editing application. If you've never seen it before, you can find out more about it on my channel at Clever Photographer, or of course, you can use any application you already have. All the edits or adjustments I'm going to be doing can be applied with other similar applications. So, looking into the comments, good evening to Tony. Greetings to you too. I hope you're doing well. I hope everybody who is watching live having a great evening. Thank you for watching online. We should be live on our YouTube channel, and there will be a replay on our Facebook page and also on our Clever Photographer Academy. Just before we start, let me make sure that I minimize all of this and quickly tell you about how you can join us. If you want to send your images over and join our membership, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/forward membership. And that's where you can sign up our Clever Photographer Plus membership, where for a little fee, you will get access to this photography review show. You will also get access to our Clever Photographer Academy Facebook group. But more importantly, you will get access to our monthly digital photography bundle, which usually includes over 300 digital assets for photographers, always bundled in one photography style or theme. So, for example, last month the theme was for food photography. The month before it was fine art, black and white photography. And in the upcoming month, it's going to be landscape photography. So check it out, cleverphotographer.com/forward membership. But this is now all out of the way, and we can start by looking at your images. So let's jump straight to it. Let's see, we have Caroline and her two images to start with. So we're going to start with that. Caroline, I can see in the comments that you watching live. Good evening to you too. Let's start with your photos. So what we do, as I said, we're going to start by looking at the camera details. So we have this first image here with a beautiful, beautiful rainbow and the sea settings, and it's very, very nice. So let's go and look at the camera settings here. So this was captured with a Canon 5D Mark IV with the lens 24 to 70 millimeters. When it comes to camera settings, ISO 100, 24 millimeters, f11, and 1/250th of a second. So for the landscape capture, especially for this type of photography, nice and low ISO. Really, we want to go as low as we can. So ISO 100 is great. 24 millimeters is a nice wide view, as you can see on the image, which is great as well. F11, yeah, I generally, for landscape photography, like to use between f7.1 and f11, depending on what's in the foreground and how much of the details throughout the scene I want to get. So f11 is great too. And looking at the shutter speed, 1/250th of a second, considering the light and the texture in the sky and everything else, I think it's a good choice too. Now, looking at the image in overall, it's looking good. Again, we have a lovely texture in the sky with the clouds clearly visible. We have some highlights. Nothing look burns out. Nothing look too dark. So all of that looks good. Now, talking about sharpness, let's have a look. Let's zoom in a little closer, somewhere around here. The sharpness is looking good pretty much all the way through. However, we definitely have a little bit of a noise, especially in the sky areas, which is completely normal. And it's something that we can easily fix a little bit later. So in overall, it looks good to me. However, there's one thing I need to note, and that's the sensor dust, which is quite common, especially when we photographing at sea, like a seascape. Often we get these little dots, which are more visible the higher you go with your f-stop. So when you go f11 or f16 or over f20, you will get lots of them. And there's a different ways there's a different things you can do. Of course, you can take your camera to the shop and let them clean your lens or sensor. However, it never really lasts that long. So the easiest thing is to just fix it in a post-processing. And depending on the software you use, sometimes you just have to highlight these little dots and remove them. The benefit of Luminar Neo is that you can go into the editing panel, use the erase tool, and here is a command or option called remove dust spots. When you click on that, what it does, it basically scans the entire image and use some kind of special powers to remove all of these spots at the same time. Let's have a look before and after. I hope you can see it. Let me actually zoom in just to make sure. You can see one right here. There's actually more of them, or two here. So this thing basically just remove all of this at the same time. Now, I just returned from photography show in Birmingham, and I have met the professional photographer who does tens of thousands of images. And he told me that he bought Luminar Neo just for this one function, because he does lots of quite kind of adventurous photography and demanding photography. So his camera and lens is dirty all the time. And he say, I just don't have a time or energy to be removing the spots one by one. So he uses the application just to remove the dust spots. And I completely understand that. Coming back. So we talk about the technical part, other than a little bit of noise, which is interesting with the ISO being on 100, but maybe with the lower light, it can kind of come through. And the dust spots, technically, I think it's very well done. As a composition goal, and talking about the artistic part, I really like the scene too. What do I like on it? So obviously the rainbow really helps to create the visual appeal. It really makes the scene much more interesting. Again, I really like the texture in the sky. If it would be just blue or just gray, it would be just a lot of it. So the fact that you have a little bit of blue, a little bit of gray, and even the gray has a little kind of darker and brighter parts, I think that really creates beautiful scene. I really like the framing as well. It almost looks like a panorama captured together. That kind of really tight crop makes it really cinematic. And the fact that the whole rainbow is there, I think also really helps. So well done on that. I think in overall, it has a really nice feel. One thing, maybe just the only thing, is that the foreground is kind of brighter. So it takes a little bit of attention away before you make your way all the way towards the end to the rainbow. Now, that can be very easily fixed by using a simple brush or maybe like a gradient adjustment. And to do that, what we can do, we can just quickly jump into the edit. And there's many different ways you can do this. We're just going to use a simple develop tool where we're going to take the exposure and bring it down. Let's say somewhere around minus 0.8 to start with. After that, we're going to jump into the masking. And here we're going to use the linear gradient. Once we do that, what we can do, we can then paint the gradient at the bottom here. And basically, we're going to just make the bottom a little bit darker. So I'm thinking somewhere around here. Once I'm happy with it, I can go back. And now we can have a look at the before and after. And I think it's much better. Another way to add a little bit more attention to the rainbow and towards that area is to make it a little bit brighter. So again, multiple different ways you can do this. Here in Luminar Neo, you can use vignette for that. So by using the vignette and making the corners and the edges a little bit darker, it means that the middle will remain brighter. But not only that, you can also switch into the advanced settings where you can use the inner light option. And by doing that, it basically brings more brightness in the center. So you making the edges darker and making the middle brighter and creating a really nice visual contrast between the two areas. Of course, that you could do exactly the same as we done with the darkening. You could go into the develop tool, increase the exposure, then switch to masking, use the brush, and then just very gently brush over the rainbow. So that's too strong. So we can go back, adjust it, bring it down a little bit, and leave it somewhere here. But I think that's about it for this image. It's really, really nice, Caroline. Well done on this capture. Just keep an eye on the sensor dust or the lens dust. It's just one thing you want to remove. And yeah, this is like a creative way how you can add even more attention towards your main subject or the interesting part of the image, which is the rainbow. Now, that brings us to the second image, which maybe is from the same location, just closer, so kind of nicer, tighter detail, which was again captured with the Canon 5D Mark IV with the lens 70 to 200 millimeters, was it as well? And then from the camera settings here, ISO 100, 175 millimeters, f11, and 2.6 seconds. So nice and low ISO again, nice zoom in for the detail with the longer lens. Great. f11 again give us the sharpness, and also the higher you go with the f-stop, the longer shutter speed you can get. So obviously by going a little bit higher, then maybe you end up with the longer shutter speed. I wonder if you used ND filter to keep it this low, or maybe like a graduate filter. Whatever you did, it worked, and it looks very artistic. I really enjoyed the look. I think it looks very nice. What I like is that you didn't go for super long exposure, because if you would go for like 10-15 seconds, it would create another look, but you wouldn't see the movement as much. So that 2.6 or 3 seconds is a great choice for this type of scene, because you can see the foreground here, then you can see a little bit of the mist, and then towards the back you see the waves with the lovely mist above them. Also, the sky is a little bit smooth. So altogether, I think it's really cool. It almost looks definitely something you could print and put on a wall next to each other. I think it's lovely, lovely capture. Well handled. Technically, again, there is a touch of noise in the sky, but other than that, everything looks good. Obviously, the sharpness, we working with a little bit different details here. So I think in overall, it looks good. Exposure is good as well. So all of that looks very good to me. So well done, Caroline. Great. The overall feel of the image, again, talking already from the technique to the artistic part, again, I really, really like it. I think it's very creative way to capture the sea. What I also like is the combination of the two. I just did a workshop and we were working on that technique of capturing places. And what I really like to do, for example, when I'm going to a specific spot or when I'm going to specific monument or specific place, I like to create little bit of a storytelling. So I like to capture that subject from far with a wider um, lens, including more stuff around it. Then I like to get the kind of mid shots where maybe I get closer and I focus more on the actual structure or on the spot. And then I like to get a final part where I just really like to get close and just get little details, maybe just a piece of roof or a piece of walk or path or stones or grass. And usually these three elements, the wide capture, the capture, and the tight capture, when you get the details, usually they create a really nice story. And that works really well on Instagram, Facebook, a website, or even when you show it to friends, because it's almost like you're telling them a story. I arrived here and then I saw this, and I think it's a great way to capture places, and I think it's very creative. So all in all, Caroline, well done. I really love your pictures today. The rainbow is beautiful. It's well done, well put together, and this is really very creative. So thank you for sharing the images with us. Now, coming back to the comments, Mauro from Italy. Well, Mauro, thank you very much for watching us live. It's great to have you with us. And now it's time to move forward, and we're going to still stay with landscape photography, but this time we're going to be looking at images from Elizabeth. So, Elizabeth, two photos. I love this one. That's a great capture. Well done on that. And the boat here, that is also a really nice picture. Very moody and yeah, characteristic. So we're gonna start with this one. Now let's go and start by looking at the camera details again. Canon RP with the Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 160, 31 millimeters, f13, and 1/100 of a second. So when it comes to camera settings, again, nice and low ISO, 31 millimeters, sort of wider view of this beautiful scene. F13, obviously you have the foreground close, but it's still a little bit out of focus. But the F13 will really make sure on a scene like this that you are sharp all the way through. So good for that. And 1/100 of a second, making sure that we have a texture in the sky, all the highlights are balanced. I think it all looks very good. So well done on that. Lovely capture. And the camera settings all good there. Now, as I say, the foreground is out of focus, little bit, adding a little bit of the depth. So I think that can work quite well. Then when I zoom in, because it's a smaller image, I can't 100% see the sharpness, but from overall look, it looks quite good to me, including the background as well. So that's all good. There is a mixture of color and grain noise on the image. I mean, that's a little bit visible, but again, we can look at that a little bit later. And we have a few spots that we could also fix later on as well. So that's for the technical part. For the artistic part, I really like the image for many different reasons. I really like the depth with, again, the foreground, the middle ground, the background, the valley. I think all of that creates a really nice 3D scene and it creates a really nice depth. I also enjoy the framing. I think the foreground of the trees and a forest creates almost like a frame around the image and opening for the mountains. That works really well in this case. Also, the contrast of the colors is really nice. You get the kind of warmer colors, then you get the greens, from the greens to the pale greens, and then into the blues, which in overall can really help with the depth as well. And the sky is also really nice, adding another element into the overall scene. So many things right here. I really enjoy the image. It's really lovely to look at. And artistically, I think it's really well done. Now, we were talking about editing and fixing some of the mistakes. So let's have a look. There was something here. There was a little spot we wanted to remove. So in this case, I'm just going to use a simple erase tool. I can just brush over it and click on erase. So that will do that. And then we wanted to remove a little bit of noise. So we can do that in the develop tool by going into the noise reduction. And here we're going to increase the luminosity somewhere around here. And we also going to add a little bit of the color noise reduction. Now, after that, we want to zoom in somewhere where we can see some details. And we're going to add a little bit of sharpness back, somewhere around 30. And the masking, we're going to add 70 on that. And the reason why we're doing that is that we want to make sure that we only removing noise from the areas that don't have an edge, texture, or details. So when I apply the sharpening without applying the masking, basically the software apply the sharpening everywhere, even to the areas like sky and areas that there is no texture. And we don't want that because we don't want to create additional noise there. We only want to apply the sharpening to the areas which have a structure and details, and we can balance that with the masking slider. So we've done that. We have removed noise. We have removed the color spots. And I think maybe the only thing I would do, I would add a little bit more brightness towards this area to add more attention there. And again, for example, for this, we can use the vignette tool and the inner light option right here. Here in Luminar Neo, you can also click on choose subject and basically click in a position where you want the vignette to be centered. So by doing that, you also adjusting the position of the inner light. So I think something like this. Let's have a look before and after. And it's very subtle, but I think it can work quite well. Now, coming back to the catalog, we're going to look at the second image, which is also lovely capture here with this kind of abandoned boat. And let's look at the camera details. Again, Canon RP with the Tamron 28 to 300. From the camera settings, nice and low ISO on 100, 28 millimeters, f11 and 1/25th of a second on the shutter speed. Everything good here. I quite like the camera settings. No problem there. The sharpness is looking good too. Uh, there is no really noise on the sky, so everything is good there. So all in all, this looks very good to me. So technically, I think everything is good. I'm not 100% sure about the white balance, but that's also to do with the light. Sometimes when you have this kind of moody gray, little bit almost overexposed light, it kind of remove the contrast and the colors a little bit. You can see how everything looks a little bit washed out. Nothing really have much contrast, nothing have much color. So that may be something we can help a little bit in a moment. But let's move to the artistic part. I really like the boat. I think that works really well. Obviously, this is nice too. I'm not 100% sure about this foreground here. I find it a little bit distracting, and because it's a lots of texture, I think it take away the attention from the boat itself. So what we can do, we can try to crop it a little bit tighter. So let's go for something like 16 on 9, and then we gonna crop it somewhere around here. So once we do that, we can just hit enter, and suddenly um, the main subject, the boat, gets much more attention. I mean, I'm gonna try to show you before we done the cropping, where you get all of this taking away the attention from the main subject, and then when we crop it, suddenly it's just the water in front, boat, and the background. I think that works really, really well. So a little bit of cropping there. Now, what can we do with the colors? We can try to push them. We can try to obviously increase things like vibrance, maybe remove a little bit of the color cast. We can apply a little bit of dehaze to bring them back if we would want to. Or we could also get more creative. And for example, we could make it black and white to be a really to make it really kind of haunted like. So what we can do here, we can go into black and white, turn it into black and white there. We can add a little bit of more attention to the boat by bringing down the contrast and saturation for that color. And then here in Luminarnio, there is a great tool called Dramatic. And with the Dramatic tool, you can just push the slider and it creates this really haunted feel. Let's have a look somewhere around here. After that, we can add a little bit of minus vignette, again, somewhere around here, with focus on the boat. So I think somewhere here, and with a little bit of inner light, or maybe not, and somewhere around here like this. Now let's have a look before and after, and it's one way or creative way how you could edit this as well. However, as I said, for me, probably the biggest thing here was to crop it down so you get more attention for the main subject, which is the boat in this case. So, Elizabeth, thank you very much for sending your images over. It was great to review them for you, and I hope to see more of your images next week. Now, moving to the final photographer, and that's Tony. Tony, we have some pictures to look at. Great to see some nature photography. Obviously, with the weather getting much better, not much better. I mean, today is raining all day, but over the weekend we had a great weather here in UK, and I went to different spots, and you can really see the plants and flowers opening, which brings a great opportunity for this type of photography. And I think it's a great way to get your camera out again and start shooting. So let's have a look on what Tony sent us. Starting with this one right here, we have a lovely flower with a lovely contrast. The red really stands out from the image. I think that looks really nice. This one, the plant. Now, Tony, when I look at it, it looks a little bit of out of focus, the center, just a tiny bit. You can see more attention on the back and less on front. I wonder if maybe the flower didn't have like a bigger depth. Maybe it was quite deep, and that's why you have a focus on the back and not necessarily the front. That's something to keep an eye on. Then this is a very lovely. I love combination of purple and green. I think it creates lovely natural look and beautiful, real beautiful natural strong contrast. I think that works really well. Then we have this plant. It's always a little bit tricky to capture subject like this with this green color surrounded by more green color. It's always a little tricky to then get the main subject stand out. I think you did very well here, but you can see where, for example, from here to here, how it's kind of sinking in a little bit. But the sharpness is good and it's very nice capture. This I really like. I love the background being almost like bokeh look. I think that creates lovely, lovely view. The details are nice. I like the shape of the flower. Um, it's very, very good. And then this one as well, lovely. I wonder if it's dandelion, maybe. Um, anyway, again, this is a great example of lovely color contrast, lovely framing, really adding more attention to the subject. In overall, I think this works really, really well. So, Tony, what pictures we gonna look at? So let's start with the purple one, um, because I really like that image. So this was captured with Canon 7D with the lens 18 to 135 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 160, 108 millimeters on the lens, and f9.5 with the shutter speed 1/125th of a second. Now, looking at it, when I zoom in a little bit, you can see that the details are really nice. I think that works really well. The sharpness works very well, especially on the foreground of the flower, and then you get very slow and diffuse zoom in the back, adding more depth into the rest of the flowers. So I think that all works really well. So from camera settings and the technical part, I think it's really nice. I like the diffuse light, adding a little bit of highlights on this area, but it's not harsh. It doesn't create harsh contrast. So that works really well as well. And again, I really like the contrast of the colors. So this all in all, I really like. I really like this picture. What I would do probably further, I would even go further and I would probably make the highlights even stronger with a simple dodge and burn, maybe just something like this with a brush and really brush over these plants you want to highlight. So maybe something like this, because I think it will really help to add a little bit more contrast. And even though there is a contrast of colors, the purple and green, by adding a little bit of more contrast with the light, it can really help to stand out the main subject. So when you have a look at it, simple adjustment before and after, and you can really see how it helps to the plant and to the subject to stand out from the photo. The vignette around works really well. I really like the natural feel of the photo. So that would be all for this image. Now let's have a look at it. So this one, as I say, just keep an eye on the focusing point, where exactly you're focusing. Always try to focus on the main part. Let's talk about this one. So as I mentioned, I really like it. What would I do to make it stand out even more? Let's first of all try to rotate it and to make it look like the stern is actually straight. Can we do that? We can do that a little bit. Let's go for 3 and crop it a little bit here, a little bit on the side, and a little bit on the side here. So we need to crop it on the top. So by doing that, I'm basically positioning the plant in a center. So to make it look like it's standing on the top and adding a little bit more balance to the overall feel. Now, after that, I would make the background a little bit darker. Again, there are different ways we can do that. For example, there is the relight function here in Luminar Neo, where you can adjust brightness of the near subject and brightness of the far subject. So what we can do, we can add brightness far and make it really dark, and brightness near, make it really bright. And then we're just going to adjust our depth, which we need on the flower itself. So something like this. And then we can make it much more natural by bringing it down like this. So now we're adding more focus on the plant. To continue the same idea, we're going to just add a little bit of extra highlights with a simple masking brush. Now, this now is very much creative decision about what you want to highlight. So I quite like the red parts down here and maybe some of the leaves on the top. So something like this. If you feel like the exposure is too strong, you can always come back and adjust it a little bit. And finally, I think a little bit of extra vibrance to bring some of these colors out. And on the top of it, a little bit of glow, which can be added through glow or mystical tool here. I would add a little bit of the Orton effect glow, or maybe a regular Orton, yes, regular Orton, something like this. And that helps to really smooth everything and make it stand out. So let's have a look at it before and after. If you can see it a little bit, I think like this, it adds a really nice touch. So what I did, that's a word. I straightened the plant a little bit using the crop and using the rotation. Then I have made the background a little bit darker. I have used the brush to bring some of the highlights on the subject out. I have added a little bit of vibrance to bring these reds and purples out. And finally, I have added a little bit of a glow just to make everything smooth together. So, Tony, well done. Congratulations for your images. It's great to see them. I really hope that you get a chance to go out again and start capturing new photos for 2024. And the same goes to all of you folks. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's always great to have you on the show, and it's always really nice when I get the comments later when you watch the replays. So this is it for today. I will see you again next week, which will be already in April, and I'm looking forward to seeing your images. Folks, have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I will speak to you all soon.